Welcome to Safety Sisters. In this episode, I chat with John Dundas, who is a radio and spectrum manager for major events. John provides insight into the world of spectrum management and how this work underpins command, control and communications, or C3. I learned just how much work goes into spectrum planning and how events cannot operate without good strategies. Learn how this is key to interoperability, what we can learn from the Manchester Arena attack and Astroworld disaster, and the critical importance of the big red button. I've always been amazed by John's breadth and depth of experience, and I hope you will enjoy this episode as much as I did. And yes, we did discuss ham radio. You and I have known each other for 10 years, right? We met at Glasgow 2014.
That's right.
Yeah. And then we have met at various different major sport events over the years. And so even though I've known you for such a long time and we keep kind of bouncing in and out of each other's worlds, when I try and describe what you do to other people, I just call you the frequency radio magician. And I don't even know if that's like it probably is underselling, because I know that you are the one that sorts all of this stuff out. And without these systems, we don't have an event, do we?
No. Spectrum is one of the biggest things, and it's really hard to describe spectrum because it's something you can't see with the naked eye. It's something you can't touch. But when you look at an event, and even from a music event up to an Olympic Games, we've got wireless microphones, we've got in-ear monitors for the performers, you've got radio systems, Wi-Fi, mobile phone, so many different things, even point of sale terminals for your merchandising. So many things use some form of radio waves, and this all has to work, because if you imagine if you suddenly have a problem with your EPOS systems and people go up to pay for a very expensive beer at a festival and it doesn't work, then someone's losing money and you've got to have unhappy customers. So even down to that level of, you've got to be careful. So many things are connected by spectrum these days.
Yeah. And I think as well with how the landscape is at the minute, and especially with a lot of like threats, including cyber threats. I did a tabletop exercise where we had a cyber threat of on a huge festival, and I just, like, my mind was blown about how many things it messed up. And we ended up considering, like, I think we need to print all the ticket holder details. But so how did you end up in this world? How did you end up doing Spectrum for major events all over the world? I mean, I think I even I don't think I can't remember if I saw you, but I know I was talking and communicating with you when we were in Saudi Arabia. So you really
Yeah,
do this all over the world.
yeah. I've been to quite a few continents now, doing it in countries, and still continue to do it. How did I get into it? Saw a job advert in 2012 for a thing called Radio and Spectrum Manager at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. Thought I'd apply for it. Had the interviews, went away and got a phone call a few days later and offered the job. And it's been non-stop since then. I've done quite a few events since then.
And so what was your background before that allowed you to pick that as a job? So you must have
I spent
worked in this world.
15 Yeah, I spent 15 years in the military doing it full time, but in submarines most of the time. So it's a bit different being in a submarine to being in a festival site or something.
What's the
A bit,
difference?
we're hundreds of feet under the water in the middle of the Atlantic or somewhere, with nobody to help us, so we have to do everything ourselves. But because we're highly, submariners are highly trained, our skill set, our mindset, and everything else, and is to try and solve problems. There's nobody there to help us. It's 139 people to work on it. So if you think about the same thing with an event, most of the time that we're there to solve problems, and then hopefully the event goes well and we don't do much and we're bored. So that started that, then came into the commercial side of radio communications. Enjoyed that for a number of years, then saw this job advert and then went for it. So, and like I said, it's been fun ever since. If you can describe it as fun.
I know people are like, you work on these amazing events all over the world. I'm like, yeah. And I look back and I'm like, I'm glad I did it, but I sometimes I'm not glad I did it. But then certainly in the middle of it, I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, that's part of the thing. And then it's hard to describe to other people. Like, some of the events, and you go along, it's a whole lot of newbies that's doing it, or a new organising committee, and you're trying to explain to them how certain things will go, and they go, no, 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 we want to do it this way, and you're just sitting there going, yeah, okay, we know it's all going to change because that way is not going to work, but you let them find out sometimes themselves. So, you know,
It's such a weird because when it comes to the sort of people who work on these events, it's never the sort of top level, is it? Like, in terms of because it's always the host city or host country, and those people are kind of come from
yeah,
those, which is right. So then what you have is the experiencer sort of a couple of rungs down. So that by the time you come in with your experience going, this isn't going to work and do this, I like only yesterday I said to someone I could write a book about how a plan will go, like especially in transport, which is my background. I can write the plan or write the story of what's going to happen, what decisions are going to be made, where you're going to mess up now, and we're telling you now to order these or plan these, and then you're going to realize 2 months before you're going to have to do it and then pay way more for it. So yeah, what's a kind of common thing that you advise early on and ends up
budget.
needing to happen? Mm,
Everybody's always got all this money, and you always tell them it doesn't matter, you're going to get cut anyway. So
mm,
you might as well plan for the cut now and actually do it properly. So later on, when they try to cut everyone, you've already reduced your budget and saved. So that's one of the biggest things. In some of the countries I've been in, you think they've got lots of money, but budget's always comes down to at the end.
mm,
Plan for a decent budget and get it right. Don't overscope, and don't have grandeur things like super duper headsets everywhere and things like that. There's ways of reducing things and still be operational,
yeah.
and that's what we try and do most of the time. The other one is actually telling them how hard it's going to be, and the fact that you're dealing with a lot of people who make demands on you, and
Mm,
people who demand and demand and demand, and the best word you can use is no.
mm,
Um, and people don't like hearing no, but it's a fact of life. There's only so much money, and so many systems you can do. So no's a good word in the events industry.
I like that. I remember one of my first manager in London 2012, when any time we were being tested of all the different things people would ask us for us, she would always ask, do we really need it? And you'd always have to go through that sort of filtering layer of like, is this really needed? Is this important? What do you love about your work in spectrum planning and spectrum management? That's what you call it.
Um, well, first of all, I've got to deal with national regulators. So basically, every country in the world has got a government body that's in charge of spectrum. Sometimes there's the commercial, the civilian side, then there's military side, and then there's some really other weird folk as well that do stuff. So you get to meet with them, discuss with them. Like some of the events we're planning this 3 or 4 years out because we have to plan it. We have to release documentation so the world media know, the broadcasters, the teams, all the results and timing people. Hundreds of stakeholders need to know about this. So to get to that stage is maybe a 2 year plan to do that. And then you get to work with the regulators and some really cool people as well, and help them along and educate them as well. And
Mm,
and that's part of the legacy. When you look around and you think, you look at Ofcom in the UK when they done London 2012, they're really experienced now at doing events. It's the same with France now. They're more experienced than they ever were, even though they kept on telling me we've done Tour de France and Rugby World Cup, and you're like, yeah, this other little summer event's a bit different. So once you get the mindset changed, it's actually really cool to work with these departments and see it all working at the
yeah.
end.
And what do you have to change with their mindset? Like, what are some of the things that they kind of think, oh, this is fine. And then you're like, oh, you got to think about this.
Well, there's two different things. One, the amount of spectrum that we use. Even a Commonwealth Games will use maybe 2,500 different licenses will be approved, be it licensed and license exempt. So even
Wow.
so, I'm paranoid about license exempt, and license exempt is your Wi-Fi, PMR 446. Bluetooth, lots of things like that people don't think about. But when
Mm.
you look at some of this, look at some of the sports like Taekwondo, in the head guard of the athlete, when they get kicked in the head, the pad in the foot hits the head and it sends an automatic signal to score it. The ref doesn't score. So that's using
Wow.
2.4 gigs. Yeah, and it's the same with fencing. When you get through to the semi-finals and finals of fencing, there's no wires anymore. It's all done wireless. So they're all license exempt. And recently at an event, we had a gum shield for boxers. We had a transmitter inside the gum shield. So when they get punched in the face, it sends a signal for how hard they've been punched. So these are all license exempt, but we have to control it. We have to make sure there's no other interference. So people keep on coming up with all these ideas, and you're like, yeah, thanks very much. We have to try and protect these things, especially with results and timing,
Yeah.
because you don't want someone losing a gold medal match because there was interference to the scoring system.
I, I did not know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's getting worse. I mean, in World Cup, there's actually a transmitter inside the football for the offside rule. So as they kick the ball around, it's transmitting a signal, and it can actually do it. It's automatic offside. That was done
Oh,
in Qatar. So if you Google
wha-
it, if anybody Googles FIFA World Cup football and transmitter or something, you'll see a cutaway of the ball with a little pendulum inside. So yeah, it's getting to the extreme now. What we sort of look after.
So when you say you need to protect those, how do I call it, frequencies? Is
Yeah.
that how do you protect them? I mean, everyone has a phone. You've got so many people in such a small area, and you have all these other systems and back of house, right? Like, yeah, how do you protect them?
Well, the thing is, we write the spectrum plan, and then that's a document that's available to everybody, and it says, here's the frequency bands we can use. You have to apply to use them, whether it's licensed or license exempt, even in you're an existing venue, or you've got, say, a UK wide license, you still have to register. Then we coordinate the frequencies with the regulators. For the license exempt stuff, we coordinate it locally, and then we can say no or yes if we think it's going to be causing a problem. And at the major events, we get everybody to bring their equipment in once they've got a license or approval, and they have to get it checked. And we basically test the equipment and give it a sticker, and that sticker means it can be used on the venue. So it's quite full on. And to give you an idea, at the event during the summer, they had over 400 officers monitoring all the spectrum on the venues and stuff, and doing proactive checks with people on the venues. So
Wow.
it's quite an event like that is quite serious what they do, because
Yeah.
we don't want to interfere with, safety of life is paramount. Safe, that's the main thing. We don't want to interfere with the safety of life. And then we've got broadcast, we've got results and timing, sports presentation. So there's lots of things we have to protect as well, all the way down to the catering and cleaning waste companies as well, because everybody wants to use their kit without any problems.
Mm. Talk to me about the safety of life. Is this
Yes,
is
that's
this like
my
a spectrum? Is this a frequency? Is it like what's
Well, safety of life is something that annoys me in the events industry. Is everybody looks at a radio and goes, "Oh yeah, that's just a bit of kit we can use to call someone." But at the end of the day, when you look at Arena Manchester, due to the flaws in the training and people not knowing how to use the system, you've got members of the public telling the security guard, who tells his supervisor, who tries 3 times to get through in the radio, then gives up. You
mm,
know, X amount of people would still been killed because he would have detonated anyway. But if he'd have called through to the control room, then they could have done something a bit sooner. And, the casualties would still happen, but not as many. So again, how do systems work? How do people use the radios? Is the red button, stroke orange button, the top of the radio programmed? When you press it, what happens when you press it to say that you need to get through? So
mm,
safety of life is paramount, because too many people treat a radio as just another bit of kit. But when you lose the mobile phone network, you lose everything else, all the other stuff. You're stuck in the middle of somewhere. A radio will help you and it will save you.
mm. I've never used the red button. I've never been briefed on the red button.
I go to the events I go to now, and you'll get briefed on it. It's something I push even in the summer. Everything had a red button. Everybody was told what to do. And
Mm.
in Birmingham, we made it mandatory training as well. We did something decent with the control rooms as well. So the good thing with Arena Manchester is it's highlighted a lot of things, and
Mm.
then it's really important because when something goes wrong in your venues, how do you communicate it? Even down to I was in a venue in Rio, and a French athlete was doing gymnastics. He was going over the horse, and everything was fine. But within 15 seconds, he went over it, broke his leg. His leg's dangling in the mid-air. You know, that's your whole venue. You've got to get the medical teams in. You've got to get the ambulance in. You've got to get the gates opened. So many things have got to be done, and the easiest way to communicate that is through radio, not through a WhatsApp group, you know?
Mm. Oh, that one. I remember, I think I was like one of the first people to try and push WhatsApp groups in 2015 on Rugby World Cup, because it was getting popular then. I was like, look, we can have these kind of talks with each other. And like fast forward to today, I don't even have WhatsApp. I don't even have the app. And I just found that people relying on using the app for communications was ridiculous. We had a radio system. Like, why are we not using the radio systems? And now I'm seeing people are now saying, do not use WhatsApp groups for, for your event comms. Like, we have a radio, we need to use the radio systems because
Yeah.
information was just getting lost.
And the thing is that a good set up radio system, it should be one to many, not one to one. And that's the good thing about having an ops group. Then all the key managers can hear what's going on. It's all about situational awareness as well, and that's why at major events, I always make sure that the police commander, ambulance commander, and the fire commander, if they're there, all get a radio. Because in Astroworld in America, there was a big crowd crush and people died.
Hmm.
And that again is another sad event because in America, as you know, the fire brigade are also the paramedics, and they were sitting outside the venue with a lot
Yeah.
of assets.
Yeah.
And they asked the venue, "Can we have one of your radios?" And the venue went, "No, you can use a mobile phone."
Yeah.
So that commander sitting outside with first aiders, well, proper paramedics, not knowing that there's a major incident inside the venue, all because someone never gave them one of their radios.
Yeah.
And well, and that would have just saved so much time and effort. Could it have saved lives? Yeah, that's always a big question mark. But the resources were there, all because someone said, "No, we don't want to give you one of our radios." So it's something that I always push now is that what's called interoperability. How do
Mm.
you work with other agencies? I mean, we've seen it in Birmingham at the mountain biking. By the time we finished, we had the council, we had the forestry commission, we had everybody on the one big radio system, and it just worked a treat for them. So that's a good thing about it if it's done right. Not have like five different radio systems with people all on it. It becomes an issue then if something goes wrong.
So when you say five different radio systems, are you talking about different uh sort of groups, or so as in that you wouldn't be able to change the group on the radio, like you'd need a different radio? Is that what when you talk about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you might have someone comes in. Well, let's go back to Saudi when you were there doing the first Middle East that we had the pleasure of doing. They said 6 weeks there'll be a big five stages here on a 65-meter high. And I was like, no chance, but they did. We put one system in and we had 1,300 users on there and we had a command
Wow.
center. So that's the good thing about it. You take the first Middle Beast, we had so many people from PRG to all the event people. So it was decided just to do one system.
Hmm.
And it was really good because when your transport organization needed something and you suddenly wanted coverage and everything else for all your operations, which was predominantly outside the venue, and let's say it was crazy outside that venue, it was an interesting event because it was the first one. Um,
Hmm.
to put you guys on the system was quite easy, but it meant that if we needed to, do a broadcast for an alarm or something, you would hear it. So there was two or three radios in the venue where we could go on and do an all call to every single radio user and
Mm.
override. So again, that's a good thing to be able to do. Whereas if you've got companies that come in and put in 4 or 5 different radio systems, there's no interoperability. You get the
Mm,
medics bring their own system, you get security brings their own system. How do you make all that work together? And some people say we can have an ECR, but if you want to put out an emergency call right across the whole venue, you're going to have to rely on multiple operators to do that or stuff.
mm.
So a lot of the events we do now, we always push for one big system, and that means you also have engineers there to support it and everything, and do it
Yeah,
right. Especially at big level, we want to do that.
that you make a really good point about this, the ones because it's, the JESIP Joint Emergency Services Interoperability Protocol is all about accuracy of communication and speed of communication, because when it comes
Mhm.
to dealing with a crisis or emergency, time is the most critical point, so the quicker you can respond. And if you have all these different if you've got all these different systems, you're now relying on more people to get a message out. You're relying on more people to get a message that they could potentially get wrong. Like, as you know, you're slowing down the sharing of that information.
Yeah, and that's one of I've actually had arguments with medical people. We want our own medical group that nobody can access because of confidential information, blah 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 blah. Most of your radios can be scanned and listened to by other people. You don't
Mm.
you we don't use encrypted radio apart from Tetra. Even the standard Tetra is really hard to listen to.
What's
There
Tetra?
isn't That's the similar system the emergency services use. So we
Okay.
can use it. Some events we use it as well, depending on the supplier.
Hmm.
So there is things that people can listen to. But my argument with the medical people is nowhere does it say in the Green Book that, or any of the guides, that the medical must have their own group that nobody can listen to.
Mm.
So right away there's nothing laid down in any rule book. Next, if I'm in a stadium and I see someone keeling over, one, there's a very good chance that person's keeling over because they're having a heart attack.
Mm.
By the time you get to the ops group, shout it through, they pass it on, time's going. Whereas if I jump right to the medical group and say, such and such in this area, someone's down, a
Mm.
couple of things will happen. One, if there's paramedics in the venue and they've got kit, they'll hear it and they'll be grabbing their bags. Other people making it, and you're just saving time.
Yeah.
So things have to be. The other thing we have to think about is we've got grey sky and blue sky. It's a term the Americans use, and dark skies, and I think they're really good. Blue
Hmm.
sky, we've got a normal event, it's running well, and then stuff starts happening, and then we go to emergency. So most of your functional areas don't do anything, but if there's something bad happens in your venue, security, EVS, and medical are going to be your three main functional areas you're going to be needing.
Mm. And
So you don't want to do something where you're blocking talking to them.
what's this? So gray sky, blue sky, is this as in the different phases of if there's something going wrong? And then is that then
Yeah.
a protocol of how you're using the radio system? Is that?
Well, it's basically if something goes from normal state to an emergency state.
Hmm.
So the Americans like to use that terminology, and I think it's really neat
Mm.
when you talk about it, because you get nice blue sky, everything's going fine, then you go into grey
Mm.
sky, and it's like, oh, and then dark sky is bad. So that's the sort of terminology I like to use. But one of the things I do, I plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Mm.
Even the radio systems where I'm asking the suppliers, if we lose the whole system, we should still be able to do simplex. The radios will work back to back. Okay, the coverage might not be brilliant, but it's better than nothing.
What does
So
that
always,
mean? Is that they're
well,
talking to each other rather than back to a central?
yeah. So they're talking to each other through a repeater system.
Hmm.
So you can build that in as standard, um, and it's always good to have that just in case. I
Hmm.
mean, during the summer we had it in one of the venues, and we had a power supply blow up on a transformer,
Mm.
which took out the power supply to the system, which then blew up the battery backup because it took lots of stuff out. So the whole
Wow.
system went dead. But all the security guards knew that they could switch to direct mode. So they just go into the radio and they go simplex, and it kept them working. It didn't stop anything, you know.
Wow.
So that's why you do it. The other 23 venues didn't have any problems like that. But that one was quite severe.
Yeah.
Something just blew up and then it knocked out other stuff. So
Wow.
you plan for it. Hopefully, you'll never use it, but
You
when
need
you
to
get
have
that
it.
call,
Yeah.
yeah, it takes the pressure off of fixing it.
Yes,
So
yeah, and it allows you then time to fix it and fix it probably properly than if you were down and trying to fix it, and you might cause more issues in the under the stress of it. And so, if
yeah,
you do use one group, so you said that you'd about 1,300 people on the Middle Beast. I mean, is there ever a number that's too much that the system can't handle, or can you just keep piling on people in terms of
um,
users?
the biggest I've done is 15,000, but that was like for 40 odd venues connected together. So you
Yeah.
actually connect. So it depends how you do it. These days we're moving away from radios and we're using push to talk over cellular. But again, that comes with its own restrictions and things. And it could be dangerous unless you've got certain guarantees from the mobile operators and things.
What do you
But
think about that?
we used it during the summer. I've used it now. I've written a white paper about it. But where people forget is in the United Kingdom, we don't have quality of service. So you've got that device with a SIM card in it, and you're competing against everybody else using mobile phones. Whereas if you've got one where it's got higher level access to the network,
Mm.
then basically if the network gets congested, you still get through.
Hmm.
Or and there's a thing in the UK called MT Pass, which was invoked last time. It was invoked was 7/7 during the bombings in London, where
Hmm.
they shut down the mobile networks, and only
Mm.
people with a designated SIM card could access the network. Um, During the summer, we used higher level access SIM cards. So when we were in Stade de France with 70,000 people, the devices could still get through and work, no problem.
Wow.
So that's the difference where you've got that sort of ability to do it. But if you're at a normal festival and you've got a push to talk device, you're relying on a SIM card that jumps between mobile operators or jumps onto the Wi-Fi. And,
Yeah.
and contrary to popular belief, um, you don't have any guarantee from the mobile operators at that stage.
Yeah.
So it's something I see quite a lot on LinkedIn and places, people advertising these services, and you're like, yeah, for transportation and other things. In Birmingham, we used them between the airports for arrivals and departures. It was
Hmm.
ideal because we could allow Birmingham to talk to Heathrow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So
That makes
and
sense.
yeah, so eight arrivals and departures loved them, and other places using them for that sort of thing. It works really well. So there is a place for them, but
Mm.
if you've got them in a venue, at a stadium where there's not good mobile phone coverage or access, and you try to use them, there's a good chance they might not work.
Yeah.
Unless they fall back to Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Like when you first kind of mentioned that, I thought, wait, aren't radios superior? But something like where Birmingham's trying to talk to Heathrow for arrivals and departures, that I think that's as you said, there's a really good place for that.
Yeah,
Um, and so it's like interesting, like especially when it comes to um central London city centre public free events, the big ones like Carnival, Pride, New Year's Eve, London St. Patrick's Day being up there. I love I'm gonna keep that in that bracket with all those other events. We've always had problems with communications. And it's always been a challenge just because of the congestion of people. And even like there's even systems like LED screens, like VMS kind of. So we're writing messages in the control room to put up on the screen. And like we would be using Starlink and it would fail. Like, or we'd be
yeah,
trying to use CCTV. And just it just seems like everything will fail eventually. And we'll even struggle on radio. And
it
I just
does.
yeah.
Starlink's brilliant. During the summer there was 38 applications for Starlink to be used along places, especially along the river for an opening ceremony, which was a crazy idea. But it's Starlink again. If you have too many Starlinks in a given area, then Starlink will degrade. They don't
Mm,
tell you that, but when you look into it and everything else, also if you've got too many Starlinks close together, they're supposed to be a certain distance away from each other. So the more Starlinks you get, um, within that satellite foot area, the
Mm,
slow the system can be as well. So if you imagine that sort of event, there was probably a lot of people using Starlink, somewhere,
mm.
from press, broadcasters, the whole lot. But Starlink, can be affected.
Because like, is there a sort of answer to being able to like access your CCTV, which you have deployed out on the footprint that needs to come back to the control room, VMS screens, speaking to like using your instant command system. Like there's so many different layers of like types of communication, and it never, the only people who seem to get it foolproof are the police, but they have their own systems, right? So
Yeah. So, a big event like that, where you've got maybe 100,000 people, if the mobile operators are not deploying additional, we'll call them cows, selling
mm,
wheels for capacity and infrastructure. But even then, if you get someone like Vodafone, will tell you they're going to put it along the river. Vodafone's only got about 30% of the UK population.
mm.
So the other 70% are on the other networks, and it'll, they'll have problems. So, what we're using now is microwave links. We used them last year for the UCI event, where we had to cross roads and other places, and rather than digging up the roads and putting in cables, you can use some really cool little microwave links which don't cost a lot of money, and they can go a good distance. And you can
Will,
actually put a couple of them.
will they fry your brain?
No, 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 not these ones. These are good. These are safe ones.
So
They're
when
not
you
in the
say,
same.
so it's like you have what one they're kind of one something on either side of the road, and they just send the signal across without using so it's wireless basically. Is that?
Yeah, it's wireless, so it's wireless links. But
Yeah.
again, it's in a frequency band where it's they used to use the Wi-Fi bands for that, but it's really congested. So
Mm.
these newer bands are actually really good. There's a lot of space on them. Again, the venue we had in Stirling, had the broadcast compound, one side of a roundabout. We had the athletes warm-up area on another side, and then we also had a fan zone. In the fan zone had a big ADI TV, as I call it.
Mm.
And then we had the athletes needed IPTV, needed Wi-Fi, etc., and things. So basically, we just use microwave links out from there, and that just saved us so much money on trying to dig up roads and run cables and everything,
Wow.
because it's a lot of money doing that when you do a road cut.
Yeah.
So
And
um,
and how far can you go with these microwave links? Like what kind of solution
uh,
do they fit?
line of sight, you can do a mile, 2 miles, and whatever you put in, you get out. So it's all IP connected. Um, so again, but you can daisy chain them as well. So if you're command center and you want to get to the other side and there's a big tall building and you can get in that, you can get them on top of that building, you're laughing because
Mm.
you can go up to the building and down again. So and even in 2014, we put a system around the city.
Mm.
We had 10 sites of microwave on a ring around the city, and we used it for the radio network, and we had to. Then someone said, "Oh, we need some IPTV fed from the broadcast centre at the SECC to the Athletes Village and to the Commonwealth House," and we brought it over that network, and then we put another link in to give Wi-Fi broadband into one of the hotels.
Wow.
So again, it's quite versatile. You can add to them, and nowadays the cost is coming right down for this kit.
Yeah.
Um, it's getting a lot cheaper. I mean, hundreds of pounds for some of this stuff rather than thousands.
Wow. So it's something you're going to be probably using going forward. But it all seems to be like you've got different solutions for different problems. It's not just kind of this one solution for all. It's like you do you break down each of your sites or something and kind of go, okay, how do we service this?
Yeah, but also you have to look and say, right, what can we use to bring everything over the one circuit?
Mm,
Rather than having like 5 or 6 different things, you might have
mm,
a main and a backup. So Starlink's really good for a backup if things fail.
mm,
So that's what you might do, because you want to, again, you want to cut your costs down.
mm,
You can't afford to run fiber. It's like for the event in a couple of years' time, we'll have dual fibers running into each venue, one coming from one direction, one coming from another. So if someone digs up the road, it's not going to take out the whole fiber link.
yeah.
But again, we might have a satellite truck at each of these venues as a backup.
Yeah.
So how far do you go? And your budget is one of the big controlling things.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because there's so many different types of solutions. What do you have, do you have like an event or a problem that almost kind of felt like it was impossible to solve when you were first given it?
Oh, there's loads of those. Um,
Every day, every day.
yeah, well, the biggest one is, first of all, is there enough radio spectrum to go around?
Mm.
You know, take the event during the summer, we had 54,000 applications and we granted
Wow.
20. Yeah, it's just a few. And we granted 25,000. We actually rejected a lot, especially for wireless microphones, because we basically just ran out of spectrum for wireless microphones.
Yeah.
So people were told to use a cable.
Yeah.
So, there is challenges, but you've got to make the hard decisions sometimes, and people do get upset, and you say, well, sorry, you can't have what you want, or, there's some frequency available, but not in the frequency band you want.
Mm.
You've got, that's why we tell people years out in advance, go away and try and find the equipment to work on the frequency bands that's available. So there's lots of that can happen. I think one of the biggest challenges I've had is people not knowing what radio and spectrum is, and then people just used to, not proper protocol. That does bug me. People using their names in the radio all the time, and just other bits and pieces. But things are changing. We do see things getting a bit better with things like that. But budget's still the biggest concern for everyone. I think
Mm.
it's the biggest challenge.
I think it also adds to the challenge if they don't, people like me, we don't know very much about spectrum and radio management and what's needed, to deliver it well.
Yeah. But my view is, I was asked to describe a radio when I went for the job for Glasgow 2014, and there was two people there, one tech and one HR, and I said it's a device. You pick it up, you turn it on, you put on the group you want, you listen, you press the button, you talk, you unpress the button, and you listen again. That's it. For an end user's point of view, that's what you want.
Mm.
All the stuff that happens in between, 99.9% of people don't care. They just want it to work when they press that button.
Mm.
So that's one of the things that we have to look at. Try and educate them a wee bit, but again, that's the service they want. So
And
that's the best description.
yeah. And so you already briefly mentioned that protocol is a bit of a bugbear and how people use the radio. So you've already kind of said something about what you don't what bugs you about protocol. You said mentioned something about people using their names.
Oh yeah, people using names. You know, if the proverbial hits the fan, using names is just going to confuse everybody.
Mm.
You know, it doesn't matter the size of the event you've got. You should all be using call sign, even if it's transport one, this logistics one, things like that, basic stuff. But too many times we hear people, using names on the radios, and you're like, guys, something goes wrong, or if you're running an event where there's multiple shifts,
Hmm.
so the transport manager might not be the same transport manager that was on in the day shift.
Yeah.
So you're calling Bob, and Bob's not there because Bob's away home, and it's now Jackie. It's there instead. Also, other people in the venue might not know who these people are,
Hmm.
so they might not. They only might. They're wondering why is Jackie calling Bob. Who the hell are these people? So
Mm.
again, protocols there. Also, when things start to go wrong, protocol gives you that bit of normality, and everything should just work from protocol. And it doesn't have to be massive protocol. You don't. You just have to say things in a nice, clear way, and use call signs because they are important,
Give me some
especially
of
for
your
local.
give me some of your protocol points.
Clear, precise messaging. Um, because I'm military trained, I don't say please and thank you, but people still say please and thank you. I usually set a timer of 30 seconds in all the radios, so if you talk for more than 30 seconds, the radio's going to cut off anyway. Um,
I like
if
that.
it's, I know it's brilliant. The average time for talk on a system is 15 seconds per message, by the way. That's the
Ooh.
average time. We've got that from stats. On the protocol side of things as well, people using code words. code words is one of the worst things you can do at an event.
Mm.
That now people might be a bit annoyed with that one, but you start saying code red, code black, code blue. You've just joined that event today. You don't know what a code red at that venue. Another event you were at, code red can mean that it's a spill of something. At that venue, it can mean it's a fire. So there's been a big debate about code words and protocol as well. And at the end of the day, if people are on a radio and there's smoke coming from somewhere, say it's smoke. You're not going to panic the people on the radios. Everybody's got a radio; they're hearing everything.
Mm.
So you might as well keep everything in plain English, and then it solves confusion as well. Because as soon as you start using code words, the first thing everybody's trying to figure out is what does that code word mean?
Yeah.
So code words is something that annoys me as well. Um,
We talked about
and
that. So episode 2 with Janty Bridgen, with taking care, like safeguarding and taking care of children at events. And she talked about the lost child protocol, and she was like, do not use code words. And this fear of when we would be describing the child over the radio and a bad person might overhear, she said the chance is people are overhearing and will try and help you find the child.
yeah,
She was
and
like, she was really saying like, we really need to stop using Disney and all those kind of words to for lost children.
so I'm glad someone else agrees with me. Yeah, exactly. Because if you give a description and you're on your main group, right away all your managers and people are hearing the fact that it's a kid wearing a blue top,
Mm,
with brown hair. So that's one thing that's really got to be stop using silly code words for things.
mm.
And protocol doesn't have to be totally strict, you know. But that's the main thing: call signs and just using plain English.
And do you ever think that code words can be helpful? I'm just thinking about, well, I mean, this is going over a PA system, right? But everyone's heard the Inspector Sands at Network Rail or at train stations in the UK. Now, that's obviously not on radio, that's out on a PA system. But do you ever think that code words are helpful?
Well, you can Google most of the code words that comes over PAs, and they'll tell you what they are. So that's one thing. Um,
I like.
may, may, Maybe in a PA system, but certainly not in a radio system. Because the radio system, everybody should be earpieced up.
Yeah,
Nobody, if you're in a public facing role, the public should not be able to hear what's coming over your radio.
yeah,
It shouldn't be blaring away when you're walking around with it. Um, you don't get that with the police. You don't get that with other people. So you should try and keep your traffic, especially if you're doing media operations and you got all the press and media around about you. They just love a good story. So
true.
so again, maybe over the PA system, but on all the other systems, just get rid of code words.
Yeah, yeah. No, and that also that protocol of always wearing an earpiece. I mean, that it does happen. I mean, in venues and things, but sometimes in festivals it doesn't, which is kind of insane because the noise of being outside, like how often are you going to hear your radio if you don't have an earpiece or
Yeah.
cans?
And the thing is, you can go on eBay and places and buy an adapter for most types of radios these days. So you can actually have your own headset and earpiece that will plug into them.
Mm,
And the adapters, for Motorola's, I think it's about £10, and it'll adapt that to the old style with the two pins. So, if you're traveling around these events, it's worthwhile maybe investing in some adapters so you've got headsets or earpieces that's yours, rather than swapping them out and things and stuff.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
but
because I had my own headsets, but then sometimes I'm like, oh, it's not going to fit into this radio, and then you just take, a D ring or whatever from what they have, and then I've got
that,
tiny ears, so it just falls off.
that's where we use Velcro or paper clips.
That I
No,
could use.
surgical tape actually works for that.
Yeah, that would
Just go
be
and ask.
more comfortable than a paper clip safety pin. Paper safety pin will work, but that'll be really uncomfortable.
You can always, if you've got hair, you can use Kirby grips. That might work a wee bit. I don't know. But
Yeah,
again,
that's
it's that's one of the things I've been asked in the past. Actually, these devices, do you have something that fits my ear? It,
mm,
it, you know, it, all the stuff I usually get is one size fits all. So
Mm.
yeah, it is an issue with certain people's ears. Uh, it's
One
nothing much we can
size
do about it.
one size does not fit all, and that also applies to PPE, high vis vest. The amount of high vis vests that I've worn that kind of are more like a dress than a high vis vest. And also there's,
You
there's all
can get your own you can get your own earpieces molded to your ear and then get an adapter kit because hockey uses that in some of the referee systems. The
mm.
referees have got their own molded earpieces for their ear, but I don't know how much that costs. So you could get it.
That was one that
But
I was always looking into was getting the molded ones, but I know that they cost there is a cost, and we should never kind of question cost when it comes to especially our own personal welfare, because I definitely have damaged my ears from all the years of working in events and live venues. But yeah, so I wonder now, like people are going to hear them and be like, no, this is a really normal thing. You say we all have molded earpieces, we all have adapters, and you're just out of the game. So that could also be it, John, because I haven't. I mean, the last major sport event I've done was Birmingham.
mm,
Always need
I,
a long break after.
I'm I'm not seeing them turn up with molded earpieces for a while, but I've seen them turn up with their own earpieces
Yeah.
and then complain that it doesn't fit the radio. And that's why I don't mind telling people what make and model a radio it is.
Yeah.
If they want to go and get stuff, and I've even found links for them to go and buy the adapters from. It's not going to damage the radio. I
Mm.
used to have a different view on it, but again, it's if they want to bring their own kit, it's quite good that way.
And can you find these? I mean, I don't know if maybe we can add some links to the show notes, but some like where you can find these adapters, like on Amazon, or do
Yeah,
you need to go to special websites to?
no, Amazon or eBay will probably find them somewhere. If you just Google, adapters for portable radios, there'll be someone selling them somewhere in the UK or somewhere.
Yeah. Okay,
So
so it's easier
it's
than I thought.
yeah,
Oh.
it's great.
So what have you got any kind of exciting events that you've got coming up that you're doing spectrum planning for?
One
You
in
don't have to
Glasgow in 26.
back
That'll be
to
a good one.
back
Back,
so back full circle, right?
I know, 12 years later. Um, a little football event in America for the next couple of years.
We'll keep you busy.
Um, yeah, we've been planning it for a while now, and also one in California that I've started
Nice.
on as well. So that's a biggie. So it's what, 4 years out. We're starting the
Yeah.
spectrum planning for that and things.
Yeah. And
Um,
with these events coming up, is there anything that you're sort of learning now that are, that you want to really kind of bake into the planning, like, things that you've already said to me about what learnings from Manchester Arena and from Astroworld, and that to try and avoid these elements happening, that you're baking that into the planning of these events coming up.
yeah, well, that's why I have to speak to like the safety and security managers and see what their ideas are because a lot of the time, a lot of the guys aren't afraid with modern technology and what can be done. The event we did there during the summer, uh, uh, the, the security people weren't sure on what to do, so I set it up in a way where key security managers in each venue, because there was 9 security companies per venue, which was
Mm, mm,
interesting.
mm.
Um, and their idea was each security company would have its own group and they couldn't talk to each other. And I'm like, that's a bit crazy. So we set it up so the main security managers could actually do an all call to all the security staff in the venue.
Wow.
And we also set it up because each security company had its own supervisor. We actually set up a supervisor all call. So if the manager just wanted to tell the supervisors of the 9 companies, give them a message, you could do that as well. And that was just changing a talk group on the radio.
Yeah.
So it made it a bit quicker for
Yeah.
them um,
That's
rather than having
cool.
to carry 2 or 3 different devices. So again, how do we plan and what can we do? Too many radio companies just give you the equipment and say, there you go.
Yeah.
But for me, it's looking at what we call fleet mapping. That's
Mm,
basically where all the users are, which groups they're on. Don't call them radio channels because most modern systems, you're not using one channel, you're using multiple ones, you just don't know it. So we call
mm.
them talk groups. and then you can see which top group each person sits on or which job role sits on. So that's really important, planning all that. And that actually drives your cost as well, because you
Hmm.
can see what sort of system you need. So that's things that you're trying to teach people who've never sort of done that, and they might do it the old way, that if you go into a venue and you've got Joe Bloggs, his or her radio is programmed only for one group,
Mm.
and that's catering, and then you go to timing, and their radio is only programmed for timing and stuff. So you end up with like loads of different programming profiles for radios.
Hmm.
Um, and then you try to tell people, but that means you have to carry lots more spares. And we've all been to events where we look in the corner and there's a box of radios not being used by someone,
Mm.
but because they're not programmed correctly, you can't use them for someone else who might need them. Whereas
Mm.
all the events I push for, we program virtually all the radios the same.
Yeah.
There's maybe 4 or 5 profiles, and that means that we can actually move radios between FAs just in case we need them.
Yeah.
So it's getting that mindset and getting people's ideas to change to something that's um, a bit more easier, a bit more manageable as well.
Yeah.
And that does work, and
Wow.
it saves money.
Yeah, and it works and it saves money because you're putting all of that work in at the very start, but you can only put all of this strategy and planning at the very start because you know what it feels like when it doesn't work on the other side because you haven't put these things in place. So like the level of your experience and knowledge is just, John, like it's completely invaluable. It's
It, it's something that the operational people don't look at in some places you go to, and you say to them, how's the C3 working for the command and control?
mm,
And a lot of C3 professionals aren't doing C3. They're basically doing stuff to do with, let's fill out loads of policies and documents and procedures.
mm,
Let's not actually look at how we're actually going to do this, and if it really hits the fan, how are we going to communicate down to that venue level what the venue is going to do about it?
yeah.
And disaster, if you have a major disaster, how is your comms going to work? Whereas
Mm,
some of the stuff I'm doing in the US at the moment, I attend some of the conferences there, and because they have hurricanes and loads of other natural disasters, they're in wildfires, their interoperability and the way they do things is actually immense. It's really,
mm,
really good. And they push for interoperability and how things work, and their C3 does involve all the communication side, not
yeah.
just policies, procedures, and someone sitting in the MOC in the main operations center writing all these things.
Mm,
Um, because sometimes I think that the communication side, on the proper communication side, gets forgotten about.
hmm.
Uh, and you see that when you say to them, right, we're going to program the emergency button and we're going to do an all call, we're going to do this, this, and this. And some people say, why? And you're like, because one, it doesn't cost any more money to do it. Most radio systems do it as standard.
Mm.
Two, it makes the venue a lot safer. So
Why are they even
it's
asking why you're going to do it? I mean, it's like
it, because unfortunately there's a lot of professionals out there that don't understand this other side of it, you know. Um, so it's again, it's educating as you're going around. I mean, I remember doing an event a few years ago, and we did things one way for the test. We changed it to the way I wanted to do it, and now that same person who's now higher up in that organisation, the first thing he says to me in a meeting is, "Are we going to do it the exact way we did it before?" And I'm like, "Yep." So because it worked, and
mm,
he liked it. So again, there's not all that trying to educate the people at that level,
mm,
because we know the all call worked, we know this worked, and
yeah,
we do the same sort of idea. Especially the all call. The all call now is just brilliant. I like the idea of being able to hit every single radio in the venue.
yeah.
And it does work well.
And that only works when you have everyone on the same system and not splitting
Yes.
people on different systems. So this is the key, isn't it? Having everyone on the same system.
Yeah, and I've heard some horror stories lately where, I'm not saying which event it was in the UK, but there was 3 or 4 different systems in use. One system in the fan zone, one system where the spectator, everywhere there was just different systems
Mm,
and different companies in and everything else. So, you think really if you want something that is going to just work together. I mean, like our job in Saudi, one of the things that people don't know was just along the road from it, if you'd have seen them, they're in plain sight. It was no secret. We had Patriot missile batteries along the roadside. You probably never saw them because they were just sitting there, big boxes.
Mm,
But again, if you've ever been in Saudi, when the air raid sirens go off that someone's going to fight, there's drone attacks, which does happen every so often.
mm,
Then the fact that if you can go on your command and control, you can tell your users on the venue very quickly, and that's the thing. When things start going south, what can you do? If you
mm.
get 5 or 6 different systems, then you're having to go into the ECR. Hopefully, each of the people, there's someone that's on each of those systems. But then how do they tell everybody in each top group in that system? They
Yeah.
can't.
Wow.
So command and control fails, I think, on
Yeah.
some of these systems.
And when you said about the interoperability in the United States, especially with, a lot of the wildfires and the hurricanes and natural disasters, which, with climate change, we're having it here as well, with flooding and other extreme weather. When you say the interoperability is very good, are you referring to this everyone being on that one system and kind of planning that
Yeah.
in the way they plan it?
Well, even if they're in a different system, they've actually got groups that they can share. They can turn up in an emergency, and
Mm,
they've got even in the UK they've got interoperability groups, so they can actually talk to other forces and stuff.
yeah.
So a lot of the civilian organisations are going down that route as well, where they can turn up to something and actually talk to each other and use special groups.
Yeah.
There's a lot of planning goes into it. So even now, I'm planning the fact that we want to give the commanders this, the simplest thing. Here's one of our radios. That's your
Mm,
interoperability because, you imagine, and everybody says, oh, that police commander will be in the control room. But if he or she gets up to go and wander around or dealing with something, they don't know what's going on in the control room or what's
mm,
going on in the venue. So again, there's different ways we can do interoperability as well. We can connect systems if need be, but again, that relies on the systems being able to be connected
mm,
to the radio companies willing to work with each other because sometimes they don't want to do that.
mm.
Um, and there's basic ways of doing it, but everybody being in one system just works really nice.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it's cheaper because you've got one set of engineers, you get one set of if you run radio distribution rooms, you've only got one of those. So your costs can be cut back as well if you do it right.
So one system to rule them all. Sorry.
Yeah, and it works time
Yeah.
after time. It's
And
better.
and I have this one question that I just have been waiting to ask you. And it is I heard about a mass participation sport event in the United States, and the emergency services were using ham radio as like a backup kind of communications.
Yeah, and
What are your
and
thoughts
and
on
you need
that?
well, I'm an amateur radio operator, so I've got loads of using that. Amateur radio operators in the UK, you've got Raynet. In America, in USA, you've got Aris, and you get something similar in Canada. In Canada, we used them in 2015 in the Pan Am Games, and all these people that do this are all certified emergency managers. I even
Yeah.
done the course. There's 3 different levels you can do because of the vastness of the countries and things that's going on. Amateur radio operators can be deployed really quickly. During
Yeah.
Lockerbie, when it was a long time ago, the main communications in the Lockerbie area was done by amateur radio operators, not because no one had radio equipment to cover that vast area at the time.
Wow.
Um, so, there was a lot of amateur radio operators involved from the Raynet side. You still see Raynet being used in the UK for events. I remember when I used to do stuff with Raynet, we get called out to when one of the big phone exchanges went down. This is before people had loads of mobile phones, and we had to be positioned round about areas where there was phone boxes. So if people came up, they could talk to us, and we could pass the message back because there was no mobile phone service. So there was no mobile phones at the time, but there
Mm,
was no hardwire systems. So again, no 999 system.
mm,
Um, Aris in America and USA gets deployed a lot, and they were doing a lot of work during the hurricanes there that hit Florida in places, and especially in wildfires. And a lot of them are highly trained people.
Mm.
But they've got the equipment to deploy. Boston Marathon, they do the backup for that as well. They do a lot of events. They're good for control room staff as well.
Hmm.
So even if they're not using their own amateur radio equipment, the fact is that they know how to do procedure and everything else.
So
So
the people as well as the systems.
yeah, the people as
Yeah.
well as the systems,
Mm.
yeah. So because the amateur radio operators, the licenses they've got, they can deploy a lot of stuff very quickly. And in the UK with Raynet, they've got special permission to deploy temporary repeaters to pass traffic over. Um, and also, if we're doing HF, we can actually, pass traffic from Glasgow to London quite easily on HF communications. So
Yeah.
again, you can do it country to country, which they do as well in
Wow.
the Caribbean islands and stuff.
Wow. So so this is something that can be used as sort of support systems for major events and also emergencies.
Yeah, so the Radio Society of Great Britain, if you Google RSGB and Raynet, RAYNET, you'll see what they've got and what Raynet can offer and what events they've been on
Mm.
and stuff. Like they do Kilt Walk in Scotland, they provide stuff for that as well, and operators, and they do other things. So
Wow.
they've got quite a few things they do out and about.
Wow. I love this. Um, well, I mean, you mentioned HF. I have a VHF radio license. There you go. You probably didn't know that about me.
Marine
Why?
radio, or yeah, because you got a boat.
I don't have a boat, no, but it was something that when we were all teenagers, we went through this safety, life safety at sea, and we did like first aid at sea, and we did the whole um blowing up the inflatable boat and climbing into it in a pond in a pool, and we also got our license for VHF. So yeah, I said
VHF, Marine.
I can operate a VHF if that's needed, if we're ever doing an event on a boat and need help.
We did.
Um,
We did during the summer. We did quite a few things in boats and use VHF radio. So
I could have next time we do that, call me. I can come and be an operator. Oh my God, John, this was so interesting. Thank you. Um,
no, no problem.
I've always been like fascinated about the work that you do, and anytime that we have managed to have a little conversation, I'm always just sitting there ready to listen to all of your really just amazing wisdom and knowledge that you have. I do have one more question for you, which I ask everyone, and it is what inspires you. So it is what inspires you, but also fires you up. What you are passionate about, in terms of the future and what you would really like to see in the future in the work of spectrum management.
Well, better understanding what I do would be good. There was a comment made at an event recently where someone says you're just a radio guy, and I got
Mm.
slightly annoyed with that, and I made a comment on LinkedIn about it. And after 12,500 views on LinkedIn and loads of other comments, people really have to understand what we go through, to get the spectrum, to protect the spectrum,
Mm.
because without it, a lot of events will not work. They just will not happen. Um, because especially live broadcast events as well. Um, so there's that. Going forward, it's hard to say because I'm trying to think. For me, there's certain things I've still got in my bucket list of events I want to do.
Mm.
There's two of them I still want to do, and I'm trying to see if I can do them because I've done most of the thing. I've been really lucky in what I've done. Um, Size of systems. I've done big systems, done small systems. In Saudi, we put systems into safari parks.
Mm.
Things you would never think you would do. But I think I've just been lucky in that respect. But moving forward, just keep doing what I'm doing and enjoying it. I do enjoy it. And there's nothing better than sitting there at an opening ceremony, um, being bored silly because you know
It
everything you've
works.
done. It works.
Yeah.
And I'm quoted, I was asked that question similar to what you've asked at an event in last year, in America, and I was quoted in a newspaper. What's the best thing you like when you're at one of these events? I'm like, to be bored stupid, because and I had to explain to the audience of 300 people what I meant by being bored stupid, and then they got it. Because if I'm bored and I'm not running around headless, then everything's doing what it should be doing. Whereas the event management team and all the other people, logistics, catering and waste, use guy, that's the time, in transport especially, because you've got so much to do. But at that point, all my stuff should be there. It should be in. It should all be working, and I should be just bored, which is a good way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it also just that seeing your work come to fruition of all those years of work and planning and educating and making people aware of how these work and how this can be successful. It coming to light because all the systems are working, everyone's communicating, everything's being broadcast. And so I think the work that you do, John, is just incredible. And I'm really glad that you have given me your time to share and hopefully educate more people about the work that you do. And especially when we've got these incredible events that we love to create and give to the world and to bring lots of joy and happiness to people,
Mm.
but also that fundamental basis of keeping people safe and interoperability and being able to respond and being able to communicate and being able to save lives and reduce injury and reduce death if something does go wrong. So John, to answer that person who said you were just the radio guy, well, to me, you are the radio guy. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your world with us. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Happy to educate people more of the crazy world I work in with
Thank
some
you,
really
John.
crazy people.
Amen. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and follow the show and leave a review if you are on Apple Podcasts. It would mean a lot. For more information on my work in crowd safety, please see murphymorris.co.